Hi everyone, Elliot Jacobson here, and it is Thursday, August 26, 2021. This is today's entry into the Disaster Diaries. So, the question that I was thinking about is, what is a disaster that comes from climate change? And I started writing a little list, and I thought about it for maybe 10 minutes and had half a dozen things that I was pretty sure were climate related, like fires and floods and other things that have been going on, polar vortices, and some of the melt that's going up in the Arctic and so on. I mean, there are things that just sort of occur to you right away and go, yeah, that definitely is something that's climate related. And you read about these things all the time in the news, and they're always attributed with great confidence these days to climate change. But what I decided to do was to appeal to the Twitterverse to see whether there weren't maybe a few more things that were attributable to climate change. And I just didn't want some sort of weak attribution, like this is something someone just thinks, hey, maybe this thing is climate change, I don't really know. I wanted some sort of actual journal article or some scholarly work behind each of those things that were given to me before I said, okay, maybe I should add that to the list. And what I found is that there is a lot of stuff out there that is a disaster that comes from climate change. And it may be a current disaster, maybe one that's going to get worse over time. It might be one that we might not see for a few years, 30 years, 50 years, or 100 years if we're still around. It might be one that's kind of speculative, but could very well happen. We're just not sure yet. But I was surprised as how many things made it to the list. And so I did compile this list. I posted it on my Twitter account, and it's pinned there at Elliot Jacobson. So if you can't quite see the list, I'm going to present it to you right here. You can have a look over on my Twitter account. So let me just go ahead and show that to you right now. We can sort of talk about a couple of these things. So here is the list, and if you look closely at what's going on here, I have divided this into three groups. The first are the consequences of climate change that are due or that are environmental effects. So these are things that are affecting the physical living environment of the planet in some way. So from extreme cold like they had in Texas to the ash and smoke that fell in the Arctic or has been still going all across North America, to crop failures and coral bleaching. So these are all environmental effects, right? These are things that you would say an environmentalist might be most attuned to. Then there are the physical effects, the actual, if you like, non-directly life-pertaining, sort of more of what a physicist or a geophysicist might care about. So the Earth's axis, for example, shifting a little bit, or the melting of the ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic and on Greenland, or methane released, or permafrost thaw. So these are physical things that are taking place. And then there are the human effects, the effects on humanity in particular. We're not talking about the effects on other animals or living things, but what is human specific? So, for example, we might have civil unrest. We might have the rise of doomsday cults, or homelessness, or infrastructure collapsing like the condominium in Florida, or some religious unrest, or wars, or terrorism. I mean, all of these things are very tangible and real effects that can happen from climate change. So what has occurred as I've made this list public is that there are definitely doubters out there, and probably the two responses that I've got that people doubt the most are, number one, that the Earth's axis is shifting, and number two, that there might be more volcanoes erupting. And I have to admit, I didn't really think that those were even vaguely related to climate change. But a simple Google search will show you something, an article like this: climate change has shifted the Earth's axis, new study finds. Or this one about volcanic activity, get ready for more volcanic eruptions as the planet warms. So the point being that as ice melts, we are actually changing the gravitational distribution of mass on the surface of the planet. And that is going to actually physically change the shape of the planet. And it's not going to be a massive change, but it'll be enough of a change so that the axis is gradually moving, right? The rotational axis. But also, as land has less weight on top of it, we get this thing called isostatic adjustment, which is, if you like, it's the rising of the land as the weight of the ice has come off it, but also it's not just rising, it can move in other directions as well. And if that movement happens to be around an earthquake fault or an active volcano, then you might have an eruption or something like that. So there are all of these sort of impressive potential effects that we could have at any time. We could have earthquakes or tsunamis or volcanoes that are actually climate induced. When I look at this list and I think about where I live here in Santa Barbara, I certainly think of fires and floods. We've had both of those. Heat waves, we got to 110 Fahrenheit. We are losing our land locally to grow things. We are, so all of those sorts of things are local to us here. We're losing our bees. We're covered with ash and smoke. So those are the environmental effects. The physical effects, those are things that are not really maybe pertinent to some local area like we have right here. Those are things that are happening more on a large scale. So Earth axis shift is certainly something we're experiencing here in Santa Barbara, but I wouldn't say it's local to Santa Barbara. But as far as the human effects that we're experiencing right down here in Santa Barbara, for me personally, it is my mental health. It is this sadness, this deep, profound sadness I am experiencing. It is depression. It is grief. It is all of this inability to sort of process just the pure magnitude of what's coming down here. And in some sense, I think the idea is that we just can't think of climate change in terms of climate change being a crisis or even a few crises, right? What climate change really is, it is a convergence of crises. It is all of these different things happening in different amounts on different places of the planet and all at the same time. So we are getting all of this stuff, right? And it's today and it's tomorrow and it's even more the day after that and it's even more next year. And it's this sort of growing fear and sadness and profound grief that this is happening. And at least from my perspective, no reasonable action was taken back when it should have been taken. And there is no reasonable action we can take today to solve any of this. Now, there are certainly drastic actions that we could take today, but none of those seem to be happening in any measure. So there's no expectation that we shouldn't hit sort of a planetary doomsday, sort of one location at a time, right? One individual experience of where they live and what is happening in your neck of the woods where you live and what's happening the next country over or state over or continent over. They're having their experience, right? So, Tennessee, Nashville, they have these 17 inches of rain in 24 hours. British Columbia has an all-time hottest day, and so does Ireland. And, just different experiences of these effects. And it's this convergence of crises. It's this absolute massive number of crises that are all happening and escalating at once. That is so profoundly sad. All right, everyone. That, my friends, is my entry in the diary for today. And I appreciate you being here and listening to all this. Check me out on Twitter at Elliot Jacobson. That's with one L and one T. All right, everyone. See you later.